Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the YouTube channel grecochess. My name is Harry Lauzaniziris. I'm going to be your host. And in this video, we are going to show the first game I played at the recent chessanity tournament in Jericho, Long Island. That took place on November 16th. The format of the tournament was quads, meaning the top four players would play with each other, 3 games each of them, then the next four, then the next four, and so on, in groups of four. And since I had the third best rating, I ended up being in the quad A, as they called it, meaning the top four players. The time control was 45 minutes with 5 seconds delay. This meant that when the game started, players had 45 minutes on their clock, and when it was their time to move, for the first 5 seconds, the clock would not move, and then it will continue going downwards. Players had to complete all their moves before the clock went down to zero. Once again, thanks to the organizers that had the tables and the boards and the pieces and the clocks, all of them ready for the players to start, so players did not need to worry about it. In round number one, since it was scored, there was a total of 3 rounds. You have to face the other 3 players of the group, meaning the first, second, and fourth best rated players. And his name was Bob Chai. And we're going now to see more information about Bob Chai. His rating was 1671. Compare this with mine, my rating was 1556. It went down after the unfortunate, let's put it this way, experience in the Connecticut State Championship. It went down from 1595 to 1556. And we're going to move to the board of chess.com. And I'm going to enter the moves one by one from the score sheet. Once again, computer is going to evaluate. If it comes up with a positive number, white is doing better. A negative number means black is doing better. It is going to comment on the move if it was brilliant, great, best, excellent, good, inaccuracy, mistake, or blunder. And it's going to say which move would have been the best and what are the top 5 options for the player whose turn is to come. And once again, according to the rules, when players have less than 5 minutes, they don't need to record the moves any longer. And that's what's going to happen later in the game. But we'll show what happened until the time and what was the final result. Bob had the white pieces, I had the black, and Bob starts with the queen's pawn. Pawn goes to d4. And I reply the symmetric way. Pawn goes to d5. And then the queen's pawn opening and the queen's gambit. Now, as you see here, pawn to c4. It's not exactly gambit because if I take it, white is a strong center and can easily get it back. Although it's playable. I decide to use the Slav defense, pawn to c6. The reason being that my bishop on c8 is not blocked by the pawn on e6. That is the other popular move. Knight to c3 for Bob, and knight to f6 for me. These are the book moves, meaning analyzing the theory. And now Bob is going to develop his bishop to f4. Computer thinks it's a mistake because they can take the pawn on c4. Well, it is dangerous to take the pawn on c4 because then Bob can push his pawn on e4 and have good control of the center, and then the bishop on f1 uh, is attacking the pawn on c4. Of course, it can be defended by pawn on b5, but then pawn goes to a4. That is why at that game I didn't consider it to be a mistake. Instead, I played a similar way, bishop to f5, and computer thinks that mine was a miss. I should have taken at c4, then pawn to a4. I would be a pawn ahead at least temporarily. I'm not sure for how long. If we played best moves, The knight at b5 would take back the pawn and will reach its position. Pawn to e3 for Bob. And my pawn to e6, both of us liberate bishops that are standing on f1 and f8 respectively. And you see now that we return to a book move. This position has been reached in theory, but through a different order of moves. That's why before we had moves with errors and misses, but now we are back in book move. We completed the first 5 moves, and Bob is ahead by 0.35. Continues bishop to d3. I decide to exchange, not to lose the tempo. Bishop to d6 for now. Now wish we could exchange the bishops. I don't like his bishop on f4. But instead he sent it to g5 and pins my knight on f6. I attack the bishop with my pawn on f6, so Bob has to decide whether to withdraw the bishop, exchange, or what else. He goes back to h4. And now my knight to d7 defends the bishop on f6. So the queen can leave d8 without doubling the pawns. Pawn pushes the pawn to c5. Usually you don't like to release a 10, so that's why the computer thinks it's only a good move. And my bishop goes back to e7 and unpin knight. We completed the first 10 moves. At this point, I have a very small advantage of 0.03. Bob pushes the pawn to f3. Usually you don't like to do it. Push the f pawn. That's why computer thinks it's an inaccuracy. And I castle kingside. Knight to e2. And I start pushing pawn to e5. Inaccuracy thinks the computer. Castling for Bob. Thinks that castling. My rook goes to e8. Pawn to b4 for Bob. Starts attacking along the queen side, pushing the pawn. I move my pawn to a6, so the pawn cannot easily go to b5 and big change perhaps and have a knight or a queen on b5. Bob sends his bishop back to f2 to have more control of this diagonal. It goes from t1 to a7. My bishop goes to f8. We completed the first 25 moves. Now Bob has a very small advantage of 0.24. Knight to g3 for Bob that wants to play, perhaps to place it on f5. And I want to stop any queenside dreams by my pawn going to b6. Bob sends his rook to b1. And we exchange along e5. Actually, the square c5. Now we'll exchange along d4. My rook has the open, controls the open e file. No pawns on the e file. And no piece other than my rook on e8. My queen goes to e5. Wants to exert pressure both on the pawn a2 and on the knight to c3. Rook to b7 for Bob that has his rook on my half of the board. I don't like it. That is why I'm sending my rook to b8 to stop it. Hoping for an exchange. But Bob is not going to exchange. Instead, he places his other rook on b1. But before we do that, We completed the first 20 moves and let's see what is happening. Bob has an advantage of 0.86, starts growing. And now he's going to move his rook to b1. I'm going to exchange. And I don't like the other rook either. That's why I'm going to send my other rook to b8. In accuracy, the computer would rather have me put my rook on a8 and start pushing the pawn perhaps. We exchange. In accuracy, according to the computer, white would better keep his rook on b7 instead of exchanging. Bob sends his knight to e2 to start another attack. My queen goes to a3. Computer thinks it is a mistake. From now on, the computer believes that what both of us need to do is control the B file. And we are both going to miss it, and you'll see the evaluation going up and down. At this point, you see that it says 3.03 for white. Bob decides to start attacking side with the pawn to g4, but computer thinks a miss. We'd rather have the queen go to b1. And my knight goes to d7. You're going to see again the computer thinks a miss and rather put my queen on b2. So the computer thinks that whoever will first place the queen on the b file, it's a nice open file, and okay, b and d the only remaining open files, but one of the two open files will do better. And we completed the first 25 moves, and after my miss, white is ahead by 2.32. But after white places the pawn on h4, it's another miss. Queen should better go on b1, and it's going to send my knight on h7, planning to later to place my knight on f6. Computer would rather have me put my queen on e5. Queen to f5 for Bob, and although it's not on a b5, it has a nice space. It attacks my knight on d7. 2.45 advantage. And my knight goes to f6. I defend my knight. The two knights defend each other. Inaccuracy says the computer would rather have the other knight go to f6. And Bob sends his queen to c8. You see what's happening now? The pawn on c6 is unprotected. My queen, it cannot go to a4 to protect it because there's a knight on c3. I cannot take the knight on c3 because there's the other knight on e2. And I'm giving up on the c6 pawn, but at least I want to create some luft, some space for my king. So pawn goes to g5. But Bob locks a position with the pawn to h5. My queen now goes to a5. Now it's not even among the top 5 moves. And Bob finally gets the c6 pawn. And now his c5 pawn is a passed pawn. If anything, a protected by the pawn on d4. This is a huge advantage to have. My bishop goes to d7 to control the long diagonal. And at this point, we completed the first 30 moves and my situation becomes very, very bad. Bob is ahead by 5.10. Will I be able to come back? Let's see. Knight goes to d5, takes the pawn, and I'm taking the other pawn on a2. Knight goes to f6 with a check. Misses a computer, would rather have the other knight join. I'm going to take with my other knight. When you are attacking, you don't want unnecessarily to exchange pieces. Knight goes to g3. Bob prepares to start pushing the other knight. And my knight goes to d5, protected by the queen on a2. I want my knight to start doing some offense. And now, queen goes to e8 with a check for Bob. The situation is difficult. If I move my king, I lose the f7 pawn. So what can I do? Bishop goes to f8. At least I keep my pawn on f7. Great move, says the computer. And you see that I'm almost coming back. The deficit from being more than 5, it's now 0.84. And Bob is going to send his knight on f5, preparing more of the attack. For example, the h6 pawn is under danger. And my knight goes to f4. A great move. You see I have a threat. If I could play one more move, knight goes to h3 check, and then I win the bishop on f2. Just one mistake from Bob away from winning the game. Uh, After the first 35 moves, we said Bob is ahead by 0.86. His huge advantage is gone, but he's still ahead. He's going to take the pawn on h6. I'm going to use my queen on d7. Actually, my king goes to d7, but you see that Bob has 2 extra pawns, so if queens are exchanged, his c and d pawns are going to win the game. He goes to f5, and I start hoping for a repetition. King goes back to g8. But he's not going to repeat as I was hoping, because at this point I had given up hopes of winning. If I could get a draw, it would be great. Queen goes to e1, so Bob is forced to send his queen back to e1 to stop me from winning the bishop at f2. Now, I can still take it, but then we'll exchange material, and his 2 pawns on C and D will decide the game, and I don't want this to happen. He has, at this point, look at that, 3 passed pawns, the C and D that are connected passed pawns, c5 and d4. He has the h5 that's also a passed pawn. On my side, I only have 1 passed pawn on a6. So I want to keep queens on the board. And I check from h3, hoping that, who knows, maybe Bob could place his king on h1 or h2 and win the bishop, or on g2, and at least I can go for repetition. King goes to g2. I go to f5 check, but now king does not go back. It goes to g3. And if it was not for the knight on f5, I could send my bishop to d6 and threaten with the discover check. That is not possible. My knight, what can it do? It can take the passed pawn at h5, but then I'm going to lose the knight for a pawn. We reach white's 40th move, and at this time I stop recording because we had less than 5 minutes. And just to tell you, the rest of the game went very fast. We were scrambling to make sure we make our moves on time, and in the end, unfortunately, the expected result happened. Bob, although he was ahead only by 0.84, he was able to exchange queens and push the pawns and win the game. So, Bob, congratulations. You started the tournament with a win. And let's see what is happening. Let's see the review of the game. What does the Stockfish 16 computer of chess.com have to say about it? You see, was more or less even for many moves. Then Bob had a huge advantage, and he lost most of it. And in the end, he had 82.5% accuracy. He had 81.6. He played as if his rating was 2150, and me as if it was 2100, way above our real ratings. In the various categories, no brilliant moves. I had 3 great moves. Bob had 14 best against 11 for me, 8 excellent against 7 for me, 6 good moves each of us. I had 4 versus 3 for Bob. Bob had 5 inaccuracies. I had 1. He had 1 mistake. I had 4 mistakes. 3 misses each of us and no blunders. Once again, congratulations to Bob that started very well this tournament. But there are 3 rounds. We're going to see in the other 2 rounds what exactly happened. But let's go once again. Let's go to a tournament. Grecochess, nothing is changing. We have 7 games remaining. 6 out of the 7 belong to hunting achievements from France Group 1 that still has not played a single move against any of his 6 opponents. Last time he logged in was October 20th. And let's see how long time does he have remaining vacation. He has 8 days of vacation, meaning by December 9th, we'll see if he's going to play or not. And perhaps he may have another 3 days after that. In Group 3, where I participated, 1 game remains. I'm leading with 5 points versus 4 for the line. If the line can win the last game, we both of us advance with a tie. If I get at least a draw, I'm the only one advancing. In the meantime, Barak 7 from Israel and my skin from Italy have already advanced. And let's see what is happening at the other tournament. At the Moonline at the water with 81 players. Underwater Moonlight, the 9 Moons tournament. 81 players, 9 groups of 9. The first 3 of each group advance. And in my group, things become worse and worse. I have already finished all my games, and I'm fourth time for third place with 7.5 points. There is an extremely small chance I may end up with 7.5 time for third and having more tie-breaking points. Even in this category, I'm way behind Alta Temnik, who is third, 41, 20, I'm 14 points behind. Extremely small chance I might be able to pass, assuming too many games go exactly the way I want. Let's see in the other groups. Group 1, Lotus Time Chess, 13.5. Lotus Time Chess from Japan, 13.5. And has guaranteed advancing. And so has Oli Kimbo from Australia with 11 points, second. Because from the other players, only one can pass them, Canon 972. So it is between, so Lotus Time Chess from Japan, Oli Kimbo from Australia have advanced, and the third place is between Marco 1409 from Germany and Canon 972 from United States. Canon 1972 needs to get 3 out of the remaining 6 points to advance. If he gets 2, he's out 2.5. We'll have to look at the tie-breaking. Group 2. Spider 99 from Egypt leads with 12 points. Group 3, VNK Vanans from the United States leads with 11 points. Group 4, Iraq Lion from Iraq. By the way, in Group 3, Maxim Govorukha with 9 wins in 9 games is one of the 2 players that have not lost a single point. Group 4, Iraq Lion is the other one, 10 points in 10 games. Group 5, Chinan Fu from Greenland is leading with 13 points, and let's see what is happening. He and Peon Perez from Palestine that has 13 points are the only ones that they have guaranteed advancing, and then it is between IMMT from Indonesia and Master Excalibur from Scotland for the third place. Group 6. That is done. Mastin B 2008 from France, first with 14.5. David 8 times 8 times 8 from Brazil, second with 12.5. And Munja 44 from Croatia, third with 11.5. These 3 have guaranteed advancing. This is the first group that we know who is advancing. Group 7. The top 2 players, Janat F66 from Uzbekistan and Trajish from Brazil, have guaranteed. Wait, let's give a look. No, General F66 from Uzbekistan is guaranteed to advance 14.5. For the second place, it is between Tragis from Brazil that has 11.5, Moabis from Nigeria, I think. Yes, with 10. And also Cabolaturado from Mexico and Firulastro from the Basque Country have some chances to advance. Group H, is where I'm almost guaranteed to be out. Khaled Kataf from Egypt leading with 9.5, and Group 9, Steam Rocket from Australia leads with 9 points. That is the news for now. We'll continue the next video with the second round of the Chessanity tournament. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the subscribers, to the likes, and to the encouraging comments. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Harry Lasaniziris. This is my grecochess YouTube channel. For now, goodbye.